like to introduce our speaker for today, who is Dr. Srinivas Padmanabhuni, who is an award-winning AI thought leader who has been awarded the title Eminent Engineer by the Institution of Engineers for his experience and contribution in the computing field. His expertise in computing includes areas such as software engineering, AI and machine learning. He also has founded and co-founded various startups over the years and was also a principal research scientist and associate VP at Infosys. And without any further delay, I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Srinivas.
Thanks. So, what we'll be talking about today is this upcoming technology called artificial intelligence. While it's not upcoming, it's quite an old technology, but from a business relevance perspective, it's a newfound enthusiasm for AI. So before we go ahead, let's start by defining what we mean by AI. So when I talk about AI as a technology, AI broadly refers to the notion of human intelligence being mimicked by machines. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. But if you look at the overall picture of what you mean by, the concept of mimicking human intelligence, there are broadly three aspects to this. The first one is called as sensing. So like human beings have senses, like we see with our eyes, we listen with our ears, like that. The AI technologies have sensing as a primary component, whereby they take in the data, and the data could be coming from something which you're seeing, or something which you're speaking, something which you're writing, text, or it could be data coming from any other database or any source. So the sensing part is basically where you take in the data. Then the important part of AI is about making sense of the data which you got from the sensors, meaning extracting patterns from the data which you have sensed. So when I say patterns, it's basically talks about how you can extract a specific kind of what we call as pattern, which is very, very crucial for understanding the relationship between different parts of the data, or understanding how the pattern can be understood so that it can be repeated when a new kind of data comes in. So the idea of core or the brain of AI is primarily this part, which is called as machine learning, which is basically about extracting patterns from raw data. Then optionally, in several cases, it's not just about analyzing the sensed data or the data which is being sent and analyzing for patterns, but we also respond with an action. For example, let's take a driverless car. In that case, we take a sensor, which is the computer vision camera, which comes in, analyzes the patterns in what we saw in the camera. Then based on that, you can take an action as to how we should brake, which direction should we move, etc. Or you can also do simply taking data in by sensor and then extract pattern from there. Then a human can take an action. So it's not necessary that the autonomic response or autonomous response by machine is mandatory. So main core is about taking in the data and analyzing the data for patterns. So that's what we call as underlying technologies. So for now, we talk about three primary sensing technologies. Computer vision, which talks about seeing what is called as the input coming from images or videos like we see with our naked eye. Then NLP or text mining is about input text data. Then speech processing is about speech input. But it's not that only these three kinds of inputs are dealt with in core machine learning of AI, but it is also about any kind of data beyond these. It can be in form of structured Excel data or tabular data, etc. So once we do the machine learning, it actually talks about creating some kind of patterns from the raw data it takes. Raw data could be structured data or unstructured. Unstructured can be three types: computer vision, NLP, or speech processing. So basically, if you look at machine learning, it is a brain of AI. It is basically talking about pattern extraction from raw data, which could be structured, tabular kind of data, or unstructured data, which is like images or video, computer vision, NLP or text data, speech data processing. So once we have this basic notion of AI, let's talk about what is machine learning. Machine learning is basically considered as a way by which you take in data and you kind of create a what we call as effectively some kind of a pattern you extract from the raw data. Pattern is also called as model. And the beauty of this machine learning is that it is purely a function of the data that is given to it. The data which you give to the machine, the pattern is extracted from the same data. For example, let's say you've created lots of input X-ray data for cancer detection. You label each of the cancer X-ray as having cancer or no cancer. Then your machine learning program should be able to extract the pattern from there so that when a new X-ray is given, it should be able to say whether the X-ray has cancer or no cancer. So having said that, it is also important for us to understand that whenever we talk about extracting model or extracting pattern from raw data, it's quite different from conventional programming. Programming logic is controlled with the program. But in machine learning, we have no control over the logic of the model or the pattern generated. It's purely data in program out or data in model out. So logic is hidden inside the data, which is extracted in form of the model or pattern. So the only way the model can be changed is by changing the data. So just before we want to go deeper into applications of AI in specifically the vertical we talk about banking and financial services, I'd like to mention that machine learning itself is not like one type fits all. There are different kinds of machine learning. In the simplest form, where we talk about machine learning, we have both input and output. And what you find in the pattern or the model is that a relation between input and output data. That again can be two types. If the output is something like cancer, where you have only two output values, there is cancer, no cancer. So it's fixed number of output values. It's called classification. Whereas if your output is a continuous value, like you're predicting a stock value, then it is called as regression. So supervised machine learning is the most common kind of machine learning we work with, which is basically either classification or regression. So machine learning is not like one size fits all. So in some cases, you may have output variable and input variable. And if you have output variable and you're trying to find relation between output and variable, you'll try to find out if it is a regression, is a continuous output variable, or output is a fixed set of values, which is called as classification, like the cancer case. On other case, there could be scenario where you only have data and you're extracting some pattern. That's called unsupervised machine learning. There are several examples of unsupervised machine learning where you could just extract patterns from data. Like it could be example like you form groups of similar data called clusters, or you could form pairs of things like if you bought one thing, you recommended another thing. Like all of you when you shop in Amazon, etc. So there are different examples of extraction of different kinds of patterns and just raw data, no output, only input data. Or you do recommendation system when you're doing some browsing, you recommended something. So that's a classic example of unsupervised machine learning. Broadly, mainly we have these two kinds of machine learning: supervised, which is classification or regression, and unsupervised, where you're just doing pattern extraction, like clustering or recommendation systems, or extraction of rules, etc. So let's come to AI-led business examples in the banking and financial services system. Today, I can safely say banking and financial services are one of the largest consumer of AI technology. So when we talk about consumption of AI technology, there are lots of problems which could be cast as one of the machine learning problems. And that's how we start to see how AI can be used in different business scenarios in BFSI. So let's look at some of the applied AI in finance domain. The simplest we look at is fraud detection. Fraud detection can be considered as a typical classification where you look at some transactions of past and see if you can develop a fraud module where if you see some new fraud, no new kind of transaction happening, you can detect whether it's a fraud or not. So I'll give you an example. Let's, for example, say you have a set of credit card transactions which you're monitoring as a company, as a bank, right? And you're carrying out your transactions normally in places around, let's say your country like India. But somehow suddenly you see a credit card transaction from some other country, like let us say you're getting a transaction from some other country like Myanmar. Think about it. It could be a hacker. So the fraud detection should be able to detect unusual transactions which are not the normal transactions. And that's a very important component of what we call as fraud detection in any financial transaction. Could be credit card, could be banking transaction from unknown hackers, etc. Then let's look at automated trading. This is another example where we're talking about using technologies like regression, where in human transaction, you're talking about completely autonomous robo kind of programs who are doing the stock trading. So what these guys do is they build a lot of intelligence into historical ways stock has moved. Based on that, they develop machine learning models, and that enables them to take action on how you can do the trading. Let's look at credit risk management. Credit risk management is again a default propensity kind of model, which you can talk about as you take a credit card application of a user, look at his past expenses, past credit card patterns, payments or past consumption patterns, salaries, etc. And then based on that, you can run a regression model, where the regression model will detect the probability of whether the person is going to be, defaulting or not in terms of some probability. Then it could be regression. On the other hand, the credit risk management could also be a classification where you can classify the, borrower as high risk, low risk, or medium risk. So depending upon how you want to model it, you can model the credit risk as a classification, or you can model it as a regression by modeling the probability of default model. So like that, there are several such examples where you can use different machine learning models for different tasks in the domain of finance. So let's look at some practical examples. So let's look at one of the most commonly used is something called as assistance technologies. Assistance technologies are bots, which are chatbots or speech bots, which help in carrying out conversations with consumers, and they help them carry out different transactions. Like, for example, look at Casisto. It's a conversational AI platform for finance industry. It can help you do transactions, like when you kind of talk to the bot, you can get current balance, or you can try to ask what's your current credit score, or you can ask something related to your historical, spend. Same thing if you look at Trim. It is using some kind of a machine learning, especially unsupervised recommendation system kind of a technology, where it uses the past patterns of how you've been spending, how you've been earning to suggest optimal way of saving. Then there are several security kind of technologies which are very useful for fraud detection or hack detection, etc. Like Vectra, which provides AI-powered cyber threat detection, or Darktrace, which tries to, based on having been trained on several incidents in the domain of financial services organizations, it can understand threat and understand how you can trace and limit the effect of it. Then let's look at insurance. There's a lot of work going on AI in the insurance domain. So people are using past data of people to do machine learning driven underwriting. So the example here is Jest, which is an automated machine learning program to do underwriting. So similarly, there are assistant programs which can keep track of your finances and provide interesting suggestions. So if you see, all of them are using different variants of input data like NLP for the text or structured data, and then doing one of the machine learning tasks, classification, regression, or could be recommendation system, etc. So it's like intersection of one of the machine learning tasks for the different kind of data which is available in the finance domain. So what you need to understand is all of this is a power of how much data is available, how the data can be collected, how curated, and then how it can be used for actually doing your improvement of a current process which was otherwise being done manually but now being done using machine learning. More examples, let us say, let's talk about JP Morgan. They have something called as contract intelligence platform, which uses NLP and machine learning. NLP means text mining, and it analyzes legal documents and extracts important data elements, important data items, important clauses, important rules. So what they do is they really help in extracting summaries of large contract documents so that you don't have to go through the entire large texts and scour minute details. Instead of that, you can have ready-made extraction routines which can extract the useful data from large documents. Similarly, there are AI-driven investment platforms very similar to the money saving assistant kind of advisors. So what they can do is they can help you in coming up with smart combinations of product plans of financial products, which will yield maximum return. So the idea here is that they look at different data points: your risk appetite, your income level, age, your spending pattern, and then based on that, they will try to provide an optimal investment platform, investment decision, which is going to give you maximum. The idea is the overall plan of where you want to invest, how much you should invest each is decided by machine learning algorithm based on the historical data. So similarly, there are other AI technologies like there's a smart financial chatbot away, which is very similar to the money saving assistant. So these are all examples of guidance platforms which help you in advisory capacities to each of you to carry out financial transactions. So then let's look at some of the enterprise grade AI applications like solutions like IRST, which actually helps in deploying enterprise grade AI for different machine learning problems across the finance enterprise. Then there are custom platforms like Zipari here, who are talking about the first and the only experience platform from a consumer perspective, specifically for insurance. So what they do is they provide the right kind of insurance plan you have to take up, or the right kind of insurance modeling you have to do in terms of suggesting the right insurance plan for each profile. So in all of this, there are three things that are very important. One, there is an input data, which is like historical data of how you have spent or how people have spent, how people have taken risk, etc. And then there is the component of what we call as the personalization. Personalization is basically talking about for your individual profile, what will be an optimal plan. So the recommendation system, which uses machine learning, will look at all the historical data, analyze all the data, and come back with the right recommendations for each of you. And that is how you talk about a kind of a scenario, which is basically going to help you in devising a personalized investment plan. Now, going forward, let's look at one of the areas where we really think machine learning has transformed the world of credit risk scoring. Earlier, before the world of AI and machine learning, there were a lot of rule-based systems which used to generate credit scores based on how the payment pattern of people was. And in those days, the separation between the different categories of payers was not so clear. But now with machine learning based approach, especially when you talk about things like unsupervised clustering, where you can group similar data based on the payment patterns, etc., you can really see that the whole pattern is clearly emerging, where you can see clear separation between different grades. So you have people who are high risk, then people who are no risk, then people who are, zero risk. So in that sense, we really can use a really complex machine learning data-driven approach to modeling the whole credit risk rather than taking a purely rule-based approach, which was the conventional approach which was prevalent in the industry. And this is happening across different financial services domain tasks. People earlier having a rule-based approach, like including some things like this is credit risk, whereas even things like value at risk computation, etc. There are a lot of conventional statistical and rule-based approaches now being replaced with a lot of machine learning AI-based approaches. Then I talked about fraud detection as a huge category itself, right? We talked about fraud credit card transactions. We talked about security, cyber threats. We looked at fraud consumers. So fraud detection is a very big underlying theme in the overall area of what you call as application of AI ML in the financial services industry. So basically, idea is you try to identify data points which do not follow the usual behavior as rest of it. So you need to have a proper outlier detection strategy based on which you try to use the machine learning to detect fraud scenarios. It could be fraud credit card transaction, it could be fraud investment, it could be fraud stock trading. So what we need to understand is fraud detection, just like we talked about conversational AI guidance platforms. These are underlying themes where ML has really helped in taking over the conventional process and transforming the process such that you really get huge amounts of benefit by applying AI and machine learning in the context. Then when we talked about looking at different kind of what you call as customer analysis, one of the big areas where all financial services consumers are using AI/ML technology is in what we call as customer segmentation, so that they can fine tune the products, financial products for each person. Insurance products specifically fine tuned for each person. So what they do is they use unsupervised clustering techniques of machine learning to identify customers with similar buying habits, and then that becomes the basis of how you can segment the customers so that we can really identify similar customers and fine tune the offerings of the different products for each kind of customers in the same manner. So each such group of similar habits can be offered a special product, which can be different for a product offering for a different cluster. So what the customer segmentation can help you is in shaping financial products for different customers as they appear in the analysis of the clustering on consumer data. Then we talked about assistance, customer assistance. So this is one area where I think we have seen maximum penetration of AI and machine learning. And the basic idea of using AI and machine learning in the context of consumer service, customer service, is that earlier, if you look at the customer service job in any industry, it was scattered between different channels: email support, pager support, email instantly, email bots, or call center. So there were several channels which were there to kind of interact with the consumer. And a single view of the consumer was very difficult to get because you have to look at all the transactions across different domains. So now what we're trying to do is, can we now, based on the idea of replacing all the conventional channels, whether it is email, whether it is pager, whether it is call center, can you replace all of them with just a simple, smart AI-based chatbot? And that is where a lot of investments happening in all the financial service companies in replacing the customer service phenomenon with AI-enabled chatbots. Of course, there is also an important part that these chatbots have to be trained on historical data. It's not like you can just create a dumb chatbots without sufficient training. So sufficient amount of training on the potential historical conversations, historical actions have been suggested to improve the performance or customer service business. It's important to keep customers happy. So what are banks using the chatbots for? For servicing the customers, for helping them take smart decisions, self-service for bank balance, push suggestions, for example. Sometimes people just push on how to save money. Get info on credit score, like CIBIL in India. Similarly, you have CRISIL, different kind of credit rating agencies. Or sometimes they take in complaints, like I have this kind of issue with my credit card, or my credit card is lost, can you report it? So what happens is the power of AI-driven chatbots is that it is replacing earlier what was being done in multiple channels by use of phone, by use of web, by use of forms, by use of email, by use of contact center. All of them are now merged into one channel now. That's the advantage of customer chatbots in banking domain. Advancing that, people are also now, instead of only doing text chatbots, they're using speech-based bots like Alexa bot. Same things, they can help them in pushing self-service like bank balance, taking complaints, pushing suggestions, etc. So only difference between voice banking and chatbot is that this is text, that is speech. But the underlying architecture is pretty much same. Then we also, as I said, there are different approaches for using the machine learning task of classification, supervised classification, or unsupervised clustering to either segment customers, like I said, right, where you can understand purchasing behavior of customers, use recency, frequency, and monetary profile to cluster the customers and group them into different segments. Or you can use classification, like for example, you can use for optimize your campaign to target only potential customers. So what you will do is you will try to find out, whether a particular customer is to be targeted or not to be targeted. That way it becomes a classification because output has only two values. So as you can see, you can use whether unsupervised machine learning or supervised machine learning classification to help in your customer reach. Similarly, you can use classification for other tasks, like for example, you can take large number of documents, automate the process of classification into different categories. Or you can also use customer sale prediction, whether a specific sale will close or not by looking at historical data and developing a classification model for that. So ultimately, as you see, different kinds of ML tasks, whether it is clustering or classification, on different kinds of process you can apply. So we could see customer segmentation, you could see customer winning propensity, or document classification, or sale prediction. These are all typical examples where you can use machine learning based on historical data where you can use that. So in addition, there are other recent applications which are appearing on the horizon and proving to be potentially game changers in the application of AI ML in the world of banking and financial services, like powerful RPA based automation along with AI. Already RPA, or robotic process automation, is a big thing in banks and financial services, but this RPA can be made further smarter by use of AI inside the RPA scripts. Face authentication based ATMs. This is again a very big thing in some sectors in some countries where instead of using conventional ATM cards, you're using face authentication, biometrics. Ops being done by AI. Ops is basically about handling tickets, about handling the customer complaints. There are a lot of text mining followed by machine learning tasks which are done on tickets raised by customers, and they can be automated using machine learning. Personalized wealth planning, this again, as I said, robo advisors, where you're trying to come up with recommendation systems of the right financial plan for every profile. It may be differing from one user to other. Similarly, you can talk about portfolio management, which is basically talking about if you have a whole bunch of instruments and fixed deposits and stocks, bonds, how to manage it smartly based on your profile is something you can use machine learning to recommend you the right portfolio. End-to-end intelligent test automation. This is again a part of how you manage your software in the banking side. Manage the test suites by automating end-to-end using AI-based test tools. Today, there are a lot of AI-driven test automation technologies like Appian, etc., which help you in developing end-to-end self-healing test automation tools. Video-based KYC with biometrics. This is again coming up in a big way where you're using biometric-based authentication to help streamline the KYC process. So overall, if you see, the basic idea is, if you look at the concept, it is this slide, where we're talking about at the core machine learning, which is the processing of the data for extracting patterns. Then we're talking about computer vision, NLP, speech processing, or input data of different kinds. It's a combination of these which is giving the possibility for any particular application. So in one case, we said machine learning is classification based on documents. In one case, it's about classification based on customer data, or it could be clustering of customer data, etc. So what I just wanted to tell you is today, machine learning is here to stay in the area of AI. And when we talk about getting into this whole thing, we also need to understand that it's not that we can just start off your AI ML journey in any business right away. You have to follow a structured process. What is the structured process? As I said, ML is a function of data in, program out, right? The moment you give data, clean it, and then you pass it to the machine learning, then you get proper model out of it. So a typical machine learning model would be only formed if you have a structured process. You start with business understanding, develop the data-driven approach to handling the business, then you understand the different data that's required for that, and then you acquire the data, then you prepare the data, you want to clean it. For example, suppose you want to develop a sentiment analysis module for Twitter sentiment analysis for a new product your bank has launched. So there you collect data from Twitter, then you clean the data, remove unwanted things, then you model it as a classification, what kind of sentiment, positive, negative, or neutral. Then you evaluate how good is the model, then you go and deploy it. That's how you kind of develop any machine learning model in real life. So what you need to understand is that just like in the software development, where you start with requirements, go through architecture, then design, then code, then test, and then deploy. Same thing happens here. You start with business model, look at data, acquire the data, clean the data, model the data, evaluate the data, and then deploy. So this is what I wanted to cover today from the perspective of the possibility of usage of AI. We have a lot of AI lectures. If you are interested, you can search on YouTube in this name, and you can get lots of machine learning related material. So, a parting thought: illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, those who cannot learn, unlearn, and be tough. With that, I like to stop here, and I hope all of you will and scenarios of AI in banking analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivas.